What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the video. So today we're going to do a little camera comparison. So we're going to take a look at the Fujifilm X-T5, and we're going to compare this camera to its great-great-grandfather, the OG, the one that started it all, the Fujifilm X-T1. All right. Now I'm not going to talk about every single difference between these two cameras because that would take forever. But we are going to get into the photography image quality. We'll look at the ISO performance between these two cameras and also dynamic range. But before we get into some comparison shots, let's go ahead and talk about some general information about these cameras. So both cameras have an APS-C size sensor and they both take the X-mount lenses. Now the Fujifilm X-T1, so that camera came out in 2014 and it has a 16 megapixel sensor on it. And the native ISO range is, the lowest is 200, the highest is 6400. And the X-T5, so that camera came out in 2022, and it has a 40 megapixel sensor, so quite a lot more resolution on that camera. And its native ISO is 125 all the way up to 12,800. Now there are a ton of other differences between these two cameras, and you got like the autofocus, the video capabilities, the battery, the screens, etc., etc. So many differences, but we're not going to get into all those for this video. We're mainly just going to look at the photography image quality output. So let's go ahead, jump into Lightroom and look at some comparison images. All right, so here we are in Lightroom, and I have a bunch of test shots that I captured with both of the cameras. Now these are all raw files, except for there are some downscale tips that we'll look at. But aside from those, everything is raw. And I did not do any post-processing to the images. You know, the files were all imported using Lightroom's default import settings. And I shot all of these images using either the Fujifilm 70 to 300 millimeter lens or the Fujifilm 16 to 55 millimeter lens. And I also manually set the white balance to be similar in both cameras as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and do some side-by-side comparisons. And now I do want to point out here that when we are looking at the images globally like this, you're really not going to be able to see much difference at all. Now, you know, each image here is only taking up about little over 4 megapixels of area on my computer monitor. So, you know, when you're taking a 16 megapixel image and a 40 megapixel image, and you're looking at both of them at only 4 megapixels each, you know, there's really not going to be much difference there at all that you're going to be able to really notice. So what I like to do is just come into 100%, and that way we have a 1-to-1 pixel ratio between the images and the computer monitor. So let me go ahead now, and I'm going to bring kind of this rocky area here kind of close together so we can get a sense of what's going on. Now you'll definitely notice right away that the X-T5 has a lot more resolution. Everything looks a lot bigger here because of that resolution. And I will say though that the X-T1 to me kind of looks a little bit sharper, even though it's smaller. So the X-T5, you know, looks bigger, has that more resolution, and you can make out more detail here, but it just looks a little bit soft comparatively here. But when we look at a downscaled version of the X-T5, what I notice here is that difference goes away and both look equally as crisp, equally as sharp here. And so I'm kind of wondering if that apparent softness that there is kind of due to maybe the lens is not able to resolve all 40 megapixels of the X-T5. I mean, that is a lot of megapixels for an APS-C sensor. But yeah, I just want to point that out. Let me go ahead now, we'll move into the next comparison. And for this shot, I focused in on these trees here in the foreground. So let me bring this over, bring this down a little bit. Oops. Okay, there we go. All right, so kind of the same story here. We have a lot more resolution, obviously, but the X-T1 looks a little bit crisper to me. Just a little bit sharper, even though I can see more stuff here, more detail, but the detail over here is just sharper. And we're gonna look at the downscaled version. Bring this over. Oop. Oh geez, come on, there we go. Okay, and now there's really no difference now. So that difference definitely goes away when you downscale it. When you downscale the X-T5 to the X-T1 dimensions, they look identical to me. Really no difference there. And I got another shot here we'll compare. By the way, all of these shots that we were looking at before, these are all at the base ISOs of the cameras. So ISO 200 on the X-T1, ISO 125 on the X-T5. All right, and it looks like the exposure is not quite equal here with these shots, but we'll go ahead and take a look anyways. And really, it's really the same story here. You got more detail here, more resolution, but you also get a little bit of softness that kind of comes with it. I know that seems a little bit, contradictory here, but that's just kind of what I'm seeing here. Now let me go to the downscaled version. And same thing. Now that difference kind of goes away. We get equal amount of sharpness here. Hey, real quick, if you could go down and hit that like button down below, maybe subscribe, that would really be awesome. Definitely helps out the channel a ton, so thank you very much. All right, back to the video. All right, so for this next series of images, I'm gonna go through the ISO ranges of the cameras, and I'm gonna start at ISO 200 here. For both, we are already looking at the base ISOs there before. There's really no difference in terms of noise. And even here with ISO 200, don't really see much difference in noise there either. And I'm not going to even bother with the downscaled version there. Look at ISO 400 here. And both of these images are very clean at ISO 400. Really no, there's not a whole lot of noise in either one. Let's move up to ISO 800 here. Zoom in. And I'm just going to kind of look at some of these shadowy areas, bring this in closer. Again, you notice more detail, but a little bit of soft detail there. Now, I do see a little bit more noise in the shadows here on the X-T5 versus the X-T1 there. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll look at the downscaled version now of ISO 800 here. All right. And now what I see is the X-T5 downscaled actually looks slightly cleaner now than the X-T1. So it looks a little bit noisier when you see it at full resolution. Now keep in mind, even the noise is going to be at a higher resolution as well. So that kind of explains what we see there. And yeah, I see just a hair bit more noise over here on the X-T1 versus over here on the X-T5. Let's keep moving up. We'll go to ISO 1600 here. Go back to that same spot. Alrighty. So yeah, I can definitely see a little bit more noise over here in these shadows on the X-T5 versus the X-T1. Not as noticeable. But then, if we were to downscale the X-T5, what do we get? To me, it looks a little bit cleaner now than the X-T1. So I think the X-T5 is actually it has better noise performance overall, I would say, based on this, what I'm seeing here. It definitely looks cleaner over here on this side versus here. I mean, it's not a huge difference. It still looks pretty good over here on the X-T1, but I definitely can notice the difference there. All right, let's move up to ISO 3200 here. And let's come down to this area. Yeah, here we go. Now at ISO 3200 here, yeah, things are definitely getting noisier for both cameras. I can definitely see a lot of noise in here. Can see some in here as well. It's the same story. The X-T1 looks cleaner, but it's also at a lower resolution, right? So when we put them at the same resolution, so we got the downscaled X-T5 version now, it cleans up. Oh geez, let's go down here. It just looks cleaner now over here versus over here. Again, the difference isn't monumental or anything like that, but I do notice it. Notice it up in here as well. I think there's just definitely more noise up in here. All back in here. All right, let's move up to ISO 6400. Now this is the limit, a high limit for the X-T1 as far as native ISO. I didn't go past this. It does have expandable options past that, but I didn't want to really mess with that. And plus it only shoots JPEG. If you go past ISO 6400 on the X-T1, you can only shoot JPEG if you go past it. So anyways, let's go ahead. We'll look at ISO 6400 here. And we'll start down here in this area. So the X-T5 is kind of the same thing. We're seeing a little bit more noise in here versus over here on the X-T1. Can make out more noise in here. Pretty much everywhere all over the image. If that's the case, then we downscale that file to the same dimensions, and now it looks cleaner than the X-T1 does. So all over the image, just kind of examining here. Yeah, just see less of that noise. You can still see noise on both files here, but the downscaled X-T5 definitely looks a bit cleaner. All right, so the next thing I want to do here is I got some intentionally underexposed and overexposed images here. And so what I'm going to do is just come in here, go to the develop settings. Now this one was underexposed by, what was it, 3 stops, I think that's what I did. Something like that. I mean, it's still a bit overexposed, but we'll boost that up by 3 stops. And I just want to copy that and paste it into this file here. All right. Now these are at the base ISOs. So we have ISO 200 on the X-T1, ISO 125 on the X-T5. And let's see what we get. And both files seem to handle that exposure boost pretty well. Definitely seeing some noise in the images, but overall I think both of them handle it pretty well. And I have the downscaled version as well that we'll look at, see if there's any difference. I do see a bit less noise on the X-T5 compared to the X-T1 there. Just a small difference there in terms of noise. All right, so now the next one here is also underexposed, but this time was 5 stops. So I'm just gonna bring that exposure up 5 stops. Just copy that real quick, and we'll paste it into here. Compare these shots. And zoom in. Both of these are getting horrendously noisy. These, yeah, the APS-C sensors on the Fujifilm cameras really, or probably any camera really, this much of a boost, 5-stop exposure boost is really kind of pushing the limits there. So these both of these files look pretty bad to me. It's super noisy. The X-T5 looks a bit noisier to me. but we're also at full resolution. We'll take a look at the downscaled shot as well. We'll probably see the same thing where now it looks cleaner than the X-T1 does. Yeah, I can definitely see it's a bit cleaner. See a lot more noise, a little bit of banding in here in these shadows as well on the X-T1. Don't really see that as much on the X-T5. I can see a little bit of banding in here, but the X-T1 is definitely a noisier sensor. All right, so this next shot here, this is intentionally overexposed by one stop. So just gonna come in here, we'll bring it down one stop and copy that, paste it into here, take a look here, and I'm really not seeing a huge difference here at all, really. Alright, compared to the downscaled shot as well. And even here, there's really not much difference when bringing the exposure down. Alright, so for this next example, we have another overexposed shot. This time it's overexposed by two stops. And you can see where these, all these areas of the image are kind of really blown out here. So I want to see how well it recovers some of these areas, especially here in the back where it's more blown out. And what I'm going to do, come in here to develop settings, we'll do -2, something like that, and I'm going to copy that, paste it in here, and let's have a look. All right, I think the X-T5 is doing a little better job of recovering some of those highlights there, or some of those areas that were blown out. I can definitely see it's doing a little bit better job in a lot of these areas. Like if you look kind of over in here, back there, and then we bring that same spot, here it is. Just get a little bit more color and everything coming back into the image. Now it's not perfect, it's still, I think both of these cameras kind of struggle with recovering highlights, but it does seem like the X-T5 is doing a little bit better job there. Alright, and let's move on to the downscaled version. Shouldn't really be too much difference between the two compared to the last example. And yeah, same thing here. So the X-T5 is doing a little bit better job of bringing back some of that information that was overexposed. Just a hair better, I would say. So I think that both of these cameras perform really well when it comes to photography. I'd say that overall the X-T5 has a bit better noise performance, and it can also recover under and overexposed areas slightly better than the X-T1. The 40 megapixel resolution of the X-T5 is definitely really great to have, but I also kind of think that the lenses that I used aren't quite capable of resolving all of that resolution, or perhaps some optical imperfections are just more noticeable with the higher resolution files. Now with the X-T1, I mean, it definitely holds its own. Even though it was released, back in 2014, I mean, we're kind of spoiled nowadays with all of these high resolution cameras that are out. But really with 16 megapixels, I mean, you can create some really great images. And if you're not cropping a ton or you're not printing huge, I mean, the 16 megapixel files are totally fine. Now, the X-T5 is definitely a much better camera all around. If we were to look at like the video features or autofocus and all the other stuff that's different, the X-T5 would completely obliterate the X-T1. But really the X-T1 is totally capable as a stills camera in my opinion. You know, I looked on eBay the other day, and I mean, you can get an X-T1 for around like 300 to 400 US dollars. So, I mean, that means you could get like 4 used X-T1s for the price of one new X-T5. I mean, that's pretty crazy. But anyways, I'd really like to see what you guys have to say. So let me know in the comments below what you think. And I'd also, you know, be really curious to see if anyone is still using an X-T1 as their main camera. I think that would be super cool if you were. But anyways, that is it for now. I will see you on the next video.